Thanks so much for participating. This is Unit 2 of Section 4. We look forward to seeing what you create. We know it's going to be amazing. The world will be able to listen to it, so keep that in mind too. Creating a podcast is honestly a work of art. Down the road, perhaps here on the Hollow, there'll be more courses available. We'll go deeper into editing, online storage of audio, creating your RSS feed, putting that online through your own website perhaps, all the way to theory in podcast sound. That means recording little sections of sound that addition can connect as a segment to your podcast. Things like that. So much you can do with podcasting. It's unreal. It's really a journey in sound and story. So let's get into today's unit. Section 4, Unit 2.
So the goal today is going to be looking at adding transitions, music to your podcast. Here is the basic empty project screen to GarageBand. It's a pretty popular app that many use. Now, going back into Anchor. This is Anchor again, my Mountain Mysteries. This is my episode page under my profile. What I'd like to do today is add some more music to my podcast. Anchor does a great job of supplying lots of really cool transitions, but I want some music. So I'm scrolling down. I see now here within my segments, I have an option to edit the audio. Of course, there's ways you can play it from here. 9 minutes, 35 seconds. That's the total length. It's just an example podcast. So if I actually do try to edit the audio, we will see in here that there's one kind of downside to Anchor, and that's the inability for you to actually edit the transitions that are built in. Now, these are my transitions. Each one of these very cool, very specific. Some of them do not apply to others. You wouldn't use a sci-fi sound in a murder mystery unless it was in space. But nevertheless, I want to add some music. So I do have an opening, which is the monster option for a transition, which is fine. But I don't see really any way, even if I go into my library, to pull any transitions from the past into this. But I can import. That I can do. So I am going to import shortly something that I'm going to create in GarageBand. Honestly, I do not know, other than open source music, which is fine to use if it's open source, a way for you to do this. So now I went into my segment. I saved this out. I'm going to get the layout of my segments are still the same. Nothing's changing there. I'm going to keep the monster transition. I'm keeping that. I'm also going to keep, of course, the main part 1 and part 2 of the podcast. Podcast transition 2 of 2. We're going to keep those in there. That's fine. Well, let's go ahead, though, and open GarageBand. If you don't have GarageBand, then I suggest you look online for an app for a music creator generator. I'm not really sure what capabilities some have. This is the most familiar one for me. So we're going to just give you an example from here on how to do it. There's other types of sound generating, music generating apps and software out there. I'm going to focus on GarageBand. GarageBand works in layers. You have digital instruments. These instruments are in your library. You play around with the sounds, layering them one on top of the other, similar to an audio file. Now, I'm not a musician, but I know when I create sound that I do want some sort of a high tone sound and a low beat with that. Those two generated together gives me the effect that I want. So I play around with the instruments, pretty much just having fun, seeing what works. Now, if I'm going to create something for a mystery podcast, I don't want to create some really upbeat type of tune. You want to create something that is at least relative to whatever theme you've selected for your podcast. I will layer these. So I'm doing now, playing around. The controls are in the bottom right. I can work with all sorts of different equalizers and play around to get certain effects. And I'll layer these. I'll play it and I'll see what works. Just like with your sound editing software, it works similar with GarageBand. basically. You can cut, you can move around tracks, you could pull segments and do different things with them, such as cut a portion out and save it and copy it and paste it to another section. All the controls are really fun with GarageBand. Playing with the different types of effects from your track and your master. You have a keyboard sensitivity option. So if you're playing on your keyboard, you can actually create sounds that are maybe have certain effects to them. And depending on how you use your keyboard, you can get different effects. So that's pretty neat. So you can see I'm just playing around. I like to play around and get something sort of a melody in mind. Now, remember when you're making transitions, you want to create something that's similar to your master intro and outro. So you don't want your outro and intro music to be completely different. So you want them to be similar. So I basically layer these, and I keep doing this until I find something that I like. I'll play it over using the controls we've already went over in the previous unit. I'll play over it and listen, and I'll record on top of certain things, and I'll move tracks around. When I find something that I kind of like, and I say, well, that's interesting, I like that, I'm going to play more on top of it and keep layering. It really is a trial and error type of system for me anyway. If you're a musician by fault, it may come very natural to you. Now you can notice how adding more instruments can actually help with layering the sound. The more instruments you have, of course, the more layered sound you're going to get. Now I'll play sounds over and over so I feel like I got it right. My goal, of course, is to create something that is connected or relative to the theme that I'm working in, the podcast I'm working on. So I kind of like this sound, this tune I've got, so I think what I'm going to do is layer it on top of this. So that's what I'll continue to do. I'll play around with the options of lowering a track's sound or raising it, similar to what we've worked in with audio. So one layer can be lower than another layer, that's fine. Pulling in instruments, playing with the controls. Like I said, it's very much a trial and error thing with me, and I think for a lot of people it's similar. But I like to layer different instruments, and I like to keep within the same category. You notice that I'm working a lot within organs and keyboards. I don't necessarily want to use drums. I know enough about music to know that there has to be sort of a bass or a rhythm section that keeps the rhythm, so I'm going to try to get that effect using a deeper sounding keyboard or organ. This process is similar to a lot of folks' process, I've learned. Now my goal is to get a tune, something that connects well with the theme of the podcast. So this method that I have of basically going back and forth with different sounds, with different layers, with different instruments, seems to have worked overall on a few occasions. Once I connect with a certain tune, I will layer it again and again. This process helps me to understand exactly how the music connects with one another, each instrument anyway. I'll do a lot of editing in this process. I'll delete many times over. But eventually I'll land on something that I think connects well and sounds okay, and that's the process. Now sometimes I may have only 3 instruments, sometimes I may have many. Sometimes I may have up to 8. In this case, I'm going to be around 4. So let's go ahead now and kind of get an idea how this works. You can see that there's a nice bass tone with this instrument. This is something I'll continue to play around with until I get it where I want it. And the goal of putting different effects inside of this is mine. So I use filters and pickups. I use all those different types of controls that we have and equalizers. I do not get it right the first time ever, so the process of going back and forth for me is very, very paramount. But eventually I land on something. And that's the process that I have. Now you save this out, pretty easy. share it as an export song to disk. That's the option that you need to work with so you can have an audio file of your music. Now, on this particular case, what I'm doing is I'm actually putting a voiceover inside of this. This isn't something that's going to be used as a narrative to describe what's happening, but actually as an effect. I want the effect of someone calling into a show, maybe perhaps past callers to my show, and I'm recording myself talking to them over top. So this is kind of how it comes out.
If you can hear me now, go ahead and tell me what you're saying exists.
Now the goal is not to be able to identify what the voices are saying, but that there are voices inside of the track. That gives the effect of there being something undertone to the mystery, something not seen. I want to give the effect that there are calls coming into the show, and that maybe perhaps I've answered these calls before. Maybe there's been some mysterious calls to come in. So that's the goal. Once you land on something that works, you export this again as an MP3 or MP4. We'll go ahead and do that now. I'm going to title this something that makes sense because I'm going to use it later. I'm going to actually bring this into my Anchor app. If I want to layer, I can, but that's going to be down the road a bit. But layering these really helps. I love transitions that overlap. Anchor has hard stops on their transitions, as I said before. This is something that I'm trying to give you an option to get around if you're interested. But I think it works well all together.
Let's take a look now at the tablet. I'm opening up all of my episodes. This is the episode listings under my profile. You see at the top, My Mountain Mysteries pilot episode. That's the one that I want to look at. What I want to see is it's actually saved in that intro I just created. So let's jump in there and take a look. So, intro to My Mountain Mysteries has been saved, 49 seconds. It looks like it's also in my library now. If I go into the actual episode 8 or the My Mountain Mysteries pilot episode, I can see the transitions. I can also go in, rename, trim, split, or remove, but there's no option to go in and actually edit over top of other segments, and that's something that I do have a problem with Anchor. Anchor is great though. If you want to have something have a dead stop, a hard stop, that means just the music transition stops and then you start talking, that's great. So you can see that most of what we're working with here is going to be small segments, trimming those small segments, which is great. It's a great option. It's a great feature. Sometimes you do have to trim audio, of course, as we talked about in Audacity. But when we actually look at it in terms of the video, we could see that there's not a whole lot of options to overlap, and that's something that I just have a real serious problem with. I don't want to, give the impression at all, though, that it's not a wonderful program. This is an amazing software. It's an amazing app.
I simply want to show with this example that you can create an intro to your podcast in a GarageBand type software setting and then import that, upload it to your Anchor app, which I've done. Once you do that, of course, you select the upload button, you select the file, and then save. Once that process, you will see that your file will be at the bottom of your segment inside of your episode. From there, you can grab that segment, create it in GarageBand, and move it up to the top of your segment listings. This means that now your podcast, when played inside of the Anchor app, remember we published this, will have this new intro at the beginning. However, you can't overlap that created file with your intro. But there's a way around that too, and I'll show you that right now.
So what I'd like to do is take a look now at Audacity, and in particular what I would like to do is import those files. So they should be in my Dropbox folder. These are the files that we just saved out. So in order to do that, I've brought up Audacity, started a new project. As you can see here, the new project is ready to go. I go to File and Open. Now I think what I'm going to do is open this one at a time just so I can organize things a little better. I've created a folder. All my file extensions are in here labeled clearly, so now I know what they are
when you see the music symbol, that's usually an MP3. MP4s can be video, of course, as well. So what I'm going to do is open the intro. So this is the intro to My Mountain Mysteries. I'm going to pull that in. So open that up. So this is the one that we created in GarageBand. So let's listen to it a little bit. You can actually listen to the separate tracks a little better in this one. I'm kind of surprised. All right, so that's what we want. That's exactly what we want. Now what you can, in Anchor that you can do in Audacity is layer these. Layer your files a little easier. This button here takes us all the way back to the beginning. All right, so it puts our marker all the way back to the beginning. I do not want it to play over and over again. I want to actually open up some more tracks, hopefully, and theoretically, these should be saved. It looks like they are, but unfortunately, whenever Anchor exports files, okay, so whenever they go to export a file out, you do not always get the best file extension. So you can see there's just a series of number, and it's also an MPEG. It's a 4. So let's see if we can actually pull this in. Go to the first one. That is the one I want. Open that one up. Okay, that's fine. So now I have this at the bottom. Now notice down here at the bottom is the file I just opened. Up at the top, of course, is the file that we first opened. This is the intro. This is music that's going to underlay this. So it's going to sound like a series of music. It's not going to be real clear. I like it to be a little bit distorted. That's my thing. I like it. So I've got the selection tools up here selected. That means I can pull a segment if I want, delete it, move it, copy it, paste it, whatever I want to do. That's a great tool. You have the move tool just below it. That means you can move this entire track down. You can keep going so that it starts or comes in about here in your timeline. What I can also do is adjust the recording volume at the top in case I want to do an overlay here inside of Audacity. I can also adjust the sound here for this particular track, and I want to do that. I want to turn the track down. I don't want it to be very, very high at all. I want it to be just slightly underneath the main front track.
So the thing to remember with Audacity is that you can overlap your layers, your segments, so that one starts before the other ends. You can also adjust the sound level so that one transition, perhaps the music, is lower than your voice. So how this works is like this. Underneath my voice right now in this recording, you hear music. Music is faint, but you can still hear it. So it transitions with podcast work similar to this. You have an intro music that's loud at first, then soft when the voice comes in, or outro where the voice is loud and the music's soft, and then it gets louder as the voice gets quieter as the podcast ends. These are just kind of typical podcast rules, if you will. So using Audacity, you can see that I'm moving my layers around, getting the similar effect to what you're hearing now. We definitely want to see just how creative we can be with our podcast, but we don't want to overwhelm it with sound either. Now, inside of Audacity, you have a lot of options of cutting segments down, so you do not have to use the entire length of a recorded track or segment. You could lessen the noise towards the end using your selection tool and your output with your gain, your sound at the very far left, or you could do the other route and you can leave it very loud, or you could cut segments maybe and paste it again so that they're duplicated. All of these things can be done inside of Audacity. Using your magnifying tool, you can zoom in all the way into the different segments so you could actually see maybe where you took a breath. That's how sensitive it can be. Now what I'm doing now is importing those files that I saved out in Anchor of all the files used in the Octavia Hatcher podcast. I'm opening up each one of these inside of Audacity. Audacity opens each one in a separate layer. Beside of the title at the top of each one of these layers, you see that there is named whatever segment it is you pulled in is there. Now you can mute layers that you're not working on and leave unmuted the layers that you want to hear. If you just want to hear one layer and edit that, mute every one but that one. Then when you hit play, your track will then only play the selected unmuted layer. This will help you in determining where you want to move it using your move tool and how you adjust the different layers so that you get different effects in your podcast. After you've arranged all the layers, you want to import more audio, you can. You can continue this process until you've adapted every single audio file that you want into Audacity and you've edited that. You can also edit, of course, in your Anchor app, but this really gives you a more detailed, more specific editing options. Just remember, you export or save your files from Anchor, open them up in Audacity, edit them as you want, and then at the very end, you need to export the entire file as one large file out as its own element. So here we'll show you how. Export. Now if you choose MP3, I'm going to show you what happens. MP3 does work. Be sure and export it with the correct title. One thing to note though, when you export this audio, you're not exporting each individual layer. When you export out of Audacity, it's going to be one entire solid audio file. Now, MP3 encoding is, you need a patch for this with Audacity. So I get around this by basically file type, I save it out as a WAV file. And notice you have a few different versions here. I'll go with AIFF file. That's okay. We'll just go ahead. That will work too. Saving it out. All these are audio file types. Now, some software will not recognize others, but I'm saving this out. It'll be an entire audio file, so you will not see layers. When you open this up again, you'll see no layers. It will be only one complete Frankenstein podcast with all your segments attached. Now here it is. We just created it. We're finished. You can open it up. You can listen to it. It's a solid file. It's complete without all those individual little tiny tracks. Now let's jump over for a second. I want to take a look at a few things within the tablet. So what if we were to import now our created intro in GarageBand and import that into our tablet? How will that look? How does that work with arranging files when you import using the tablet, not the computer? Let's see and test that out. Also, I want to show you a little bit about the editing capabilities of Anchor. There are some great editing capabilities. I don't want to downplay that. Inside of the Anchor app on your tablet or iPhone, there's a different type of user face, a little bit different. It looks different, but if you go into your segment, now this is your episode for, or my episode for My Mountain Mysteries. That's of course under your episode settings. So in your library, you see up to the top right, it says switch episode. Currently, I'm in My Mountain Mysteries pilot episode. Now, on certain types of tracks, you can edit. You cannot edit Anchor's own transitions. Now, this is what, though, the trim audio looks like. There's different things you could do. You could trim, but you can squeeze, you can pinch and zoom in. And you can actually go in so far where you can see all the tiny little elements of that particular track. And you can edit those. You can trim it, you can cut it down. It's a really neat option. And it's cool that you can actually create an entire podcast from your phone. So let's say you need to remove mistakes out of a certain recording. Well, this is how you do it. You can go in and pull those little mistakes out. You can listen to it and zoom in. You can even get so much as a knock, a breath, a sigh. Maybe if you say, too many times. Now I'm going to try to record something to go as an intro on top of that music. So I know I've got multiple intros. I have the intro music we created inside GarageBand, but then also I want to create something where I just welcome everyone, and I can actually have a little bit of music underneath this inside of the tablet. which is really neat. So open up the record button, your tab, I should say, move it up, record. You have the option of putting a little bit of music behind it if you want. You gotta be careful though. Although you can use similar music, your music may not match. It may not sound the same aesthetically, meaning that if you worked really hard in GarageBand to create a really interesting, mysterious sounding intro, and then you use Anchor to record some audio before that, and then you matched it up with something in the background that's maybe happy, like ice cream truck music, the jingles, you could see how that would conflict a great deal. But you can record a welcoming intro. Once you're finished, you can add that to your episode, title whatever it is. So this would be intro, and I'll put MMM for short, My Mountain Mysteries, right? And you import that, and you can add it to your episode. So now I have the intro at the bottom, move it all the way to the top, so we get an idea of what this might sound like. Right here.
Claustrophobia.
Let's see what we got.
A true condition. Many people suffer from it. It's the fear of being in enclosed spaces.
Might be a little hard to hear.
When I think of that, what comes to my mind?
But the intro's there.
Of a box.
Of course, if you were listening to this from your tablet yourself, you could hear it very well and posted.
Maybe tons of dirt
So,
on top of me.
Adding
That's
segments
a terrifying thought. Imagine waking up
and rearranging them and editing ones you create are very doable in Anchor. The limitations, of course, are, though, having those transitions that overlap in that way. But you can create and you can share and edit. So that's amazing. It's a wonderful feature. You trim, split, share, open it up in another program, and then save out all your work, though. I saved to Dropbox. That's what I use a lot. So I may save all my files there. That way I can access them wherever I am. Or if I'm on a computer or Anchor or anything, I have files ready. So I highly recommend Dropbox or your Google Drive, either one. It's really good options for saving segments to use later outside your library, inside of your Anchor app.
We look forward to seeing what you create. We know it's going to be amazing. The world will be able to listen to it, so keep that in mind too. Creating a podcast is honestly a work of art. Down the road, perhaps here on The Holler, there'll be more courses available. We'll go deeper into editing, online storage of audio, creating your RSS feed, putting that online through your own website perhaps, all the way to theory in podcast sound. That means recording little sections of sound that addition can connect as a segment to your podcast. A good example is someone walking. If you're telling a story about someone walking down a gravel road, you yourself could go out, take your recorder, your phone, and record your feet as you walk through gravel, and then bring that in as a sound effect in the background. Things like that. So much you could do with podcasting. It's unreal. It's really a journey in sound and story. So thanks so much again for participating. Look forward to seeing what you create. For The Holler, I'm Christopher Epling. See you soon.